Hey, it worked. We're live. All right, everybody,
Hey, very
welcome.
cool. Nice.
Welcome back to the Weird Bible Podcast. This is episode 4, I think, which means we've been doing this since February.
February.
Pretty
Yep,
cool.
February.
All right, so
Cool.
we actually asked you guys what you wanted to hear about because we were curious, and the answer that we got a bunch of them. One of them was.
It worked. We're live.
All right, oh my God, I've got my welcome back. The stream running in the background. Okay, there we go. So we asked everybody what they wanted to hear about, and a lot of you said Job, which we're going to get to. A bunch of people said Revelation, which we'll also get to, but those are two rather thick boys when it comes to books of the Bible. So we settled on the number 3 suggestion we had, which was the Tower of Babel and King Nimrod, which is really a very brief bit of the Bible, but probably one of the most recognizable ones. Everyone knows the story of the Tower of Babel, but it's really only mentioned briefly a couple of times. So I'm excited about this one because I got to dig into some biblical history. I got to trace some genealogies. Isaiah over here, I know, has some thoughts, some opinions. And this might be a fun one because I know you take the dates in the Bible a little bit more literally than I do, so this will be interesting.
I do. Yeah, pretty much. I also need to ask, do you have a reason other than being a Fed to pronounce it as Babel?
No, that's just how I've always heard it pronounced.
That's how you... Okay, all right.
What, are you Babel? Are you Tower of Babel?
Babel. That's where the word Babel comes from. What are you talking about?
I've always heard Babel.
You are.
We have an early super chat, by the way, that I want to read because it's oddly specific from Hammond. He says, "You two never had the makings of a varsity athlete." I would agree that the two of us combined at no point had the makings of a varsity athlete. That would be an utter monstrosity.
What kind of a diss is that?
I don't know. Were you a varsity athlete?
No.
I actually was for everyone's information.
Okay. Do you mean like high school? Yeah, I played in high school.
Okay, yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
What a fancy way to say you played in high school. Yeah, I played baseball.
Oh yeah, see. Somebody said Tower of Beyblade, and that is now some Bible fanfic that I want. If someone writes a Tower of Beyblade story, I will narrate it. I will 100% do that. But
you do this to yourself. Did you ever wear the maid skirt, by the way?
I have not worn the one that we got to last month or the month before. I do still have the maid costume, but I don't fit in it anymore because I got fat over the winter. So I'm working on losing the weight to fit back into the maid costume.
To fit into your maid costume.
Yeah. That's always a fun one to explain to people at the bar. Yeah, I'm working out. You trying to get in shape for summer? Yeah, sure. One of these days I'll do this show in the maid costume. All right. So, I'm not even acknowledging the one where they said biblicity. That's horrible. I hate you all. This is disgusting.
That's terrific.
So, now that we're 3 minutes into this talking about everything except the Bible, so the story of the Tower of Babel, the one that most people know, is that this is the reason that all of the peoples of the earth speak different languages. That is the basic Sunday school version. The king of Babylon decided to build a tower so tall that it would reach heaven, and God was like, not about it. So he's like, all right, you all speak different languages now, and then he scatters them to the 4 winds. It's a very basic retelling of the story, but I think for this one I want to start with Isaiah's. I'm gonna have you go through it instead of setting up the history first, because the history side of things is funky but really cool.
Okay. All right. So the basic, again, Sunday school teacher version, which is what I'm here for, is that at the beginning humanity was all joined together. This is after the flood, so humanity's essentially had its reset. And they were all joined together. I believe you said it was 2 generations after Shem, which would have been 3 generations.
Yes. So according to the Bible, it is. This is where it gets funky. The name we get, in chapter 10 of Genesis is they talk about Nimrod, and then immediately they start talking about the Tower of Babel. I'm not so sure that they're as connected as that. But yes, so what we get is that the Tower of Babel is chronologically in the Bible between the flood and Shem having his first son. So bit confusing in terms of the actual chronology there, especially because it says that Shem has his first son 2 years after the flood, but Nimrod is the grandson of Noah, or actually he's the grandson of Ham. So there's a bit of weirdness there, which is why when I was texting you about this earlier, I was like, I'm not so sure that these are as connected as we think they are. Because if you read it, there weren't actually chapters in the Bible as a standardized thing until the 1500s.
Correct.
So the fact that the end of 10 and the beginning of 11 are where they are does not necessarily mean that chronology is supposed to be broken up that way. So it could be that we're getting told two different stories that occurred at two different times, and one is just popped in between the two, because the original version of the Bible was oral tradition, and so that's how we got here. But yeah, so it's a bit confusing in terms of the actual chronology of when does this get built, but what we do know is that it's after the flood and very, very early after the flood.
Correct, yeah, so pretty early after the flood, all of humanity was gathered together, and then they decided King Nimrod, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so King Nimrod decides that humanity as it currently exists, could ascend to the point of godhood. And to do that, they will physically climb their way up to God. So all of humanity got together, and they started building bricks. Everyone was together, and they were building a tower to ascend to, I guess, fight God, to directly square up with him, which you got to admire.
Oh, yeah, you got to admire the reasoning.
Oh, they're 3 generations, again, going off of that, 3 generations after he just wiped out the whole earth. And they're like, I think we could take him. If we climb up there, we got it. So,
it's like playing a video game, getting your ass handed to you, and immediately going to the final boss. Like you just survived the apocalypse of the first one, jumped into the second one, and speed ran it to the final boss. Like,
you gotta admire their gumption, if nothing else.
Exactly.
So anyway, they all begin to build this massive tower called the Tower of Babel, and as they're beginning to climb their way to the heavens, all of a sudden it says that God confounds their language. So I think the way words, I can pull it up, but you've got to pull it up. It says that they cannot understand what the man next to him was saying. So it's a very deliberate, like God snapped his fingers, and then this person did not speak the language of this person, who did not speak the language of this person. And eventually, everyone was now forced to be in these different languages, so they began to separate from the tower, and that's viewed as many historians or biblical historians as being the birth of civilization expanding, and the first languages starting.
Yeah.
So that's the basic idea of it. The Tower of Babel eventually leads to the original Babylonian Empire, which, as Aidan mentioned to me earlier, there are 2 of.
Yes.
But the first Babylonian Empire would have had its roots here, which is believed by many to be the first civilization or the first kingdom of sorts. So you have a lot of people. I can see your face. I know you'll get into more detail with that, but a lot of people view the Tower of Babel as being the beginning of modern history. So.
Yeah, I mean, that basically covers the entire biblical version of it. I mean, it's what we get here is, I'll just read through 11, 1 through, what is it? It's 1 through 9. And the whole earth was of, all right, well, so here's why I said that there's an important bit about understanding biblical chronology in terms of the way that the Bible is actually organized and compiled, is that the book of Genesis was originally just one book, as far as we have it. Throughout different periods of time, different people broke it up in different ways. The version we use now, it was standardized in the 1590s with, I think, the Geneva Bible, if I remember correctly. And the way that it worked was they just broke things up into chapters where they felt like this was one complete story. Even if it led into another, it was at the very least, the concepts within were contained. This specific chapter, when you go from 10 and 11, you can really break it up even further into, you can make 10 and 11 their own thing, Because by the time you get to chapter 12, we're talking about the call of Abraham, which is God saying, go into Canaan. That story. So 11 being broken off from 10 seems to be a decision because of the part where they start going into the Tower of Babel. But I don't think you necessarily need to break 10 and 11 up, because what you get is the generations of Noah, and it gives you the generations of Noah down to what is it? And the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kithim, and Dodanim. And then you get the sons of Ham, and then the sons of Shem. And kind of in the middle of the sons of Shem, you get the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. And then, but the thing is, so
I love that I trip you up.
I hate you for this. I hate you for this. Ahead. It's because you called me a fed. You know how to push my buttons. So, in the middle of us talking about the sons of Shem, we get this story about the Tower of Babel. And then after the 9 verses that are about the Tower of Babel, we go right back into the sons of Shem. So it's a story that's kind of just put in here, and it's hard to discern why, but what you get is, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed in the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. To hold for a second here, Shinar is Mesopotamia. They were journeying in the east, not necessarily to the east. So this just means that humanity at the time was in what was the global east for the people of the time, which would have been Babylon. And where they say, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. That I found very, very, very important, which is the kind of thing that I'm sure most people would just gloss over, but because I am the anal retentive history major that I am, that stuck out to me, because bricks that were fired clay rather than sun-baked clay were not in use in Mesopotamia until 3000 BC. So this gives us an actual earliest possible point for the construction of the tower, because it says that these are bricks that were made by burning them. These are actual baked bricks, not sun-dried bricks. And slime is bitumen, which has been used since 40,000 years ago. Even the Neanderthals were using it. And then they said, Go, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad lest we be scattered abroad upon the whole face of the earth. So that's them saying, we're going to make the tower, we're going to make the city, and this is how we're going to keep ourselves together. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. You've got to keep in mind, at this point in the Bible, we just got past original sin, we just got past the Nephilim, and God is like, really, already? Like, you guys are already on some new bullshit? That's literally, I mean, when you read it, that's what it says. I know, I'm paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing the Lord.
It's funny that they've put up with giants in a global flood, and they're like, we can take him. Come on, let's build a really big hill.
Exactly.
This is a side question that I know can't.
I thought you were gonna say it was a side quest. I was like, I guess.
A little bit. How big do you think the tower was?
That's the thing, is like, if you think about skyscrapers today, like the ones in Abu Dhabi are really tall. The Empire State Building's pretty tall.
Right.
I feel like this was probably more like Independence Hall in Philadelphia tall, where it's like a couple hundred feet, but...
You think they got that far? Because in my head, I see a bunch of people, they start burning bricks, and they get like 8 feet off the ground. And God's like, stop that.
I mean, the average height for like a wall in the Babylonian imperial period would have been 5 to 10 meters. So I feel like they could have gotten at least that high.
Okay, all right.
After that point,
maybe, perhaps.
After that point, there are some questions we could ask, you know?
It's funny for me to imagine that they just started whenever they all couldn't speak the same language. Probably was started. Now, my favorite depiction is like those old like John Milton paintings where it's like a colossal monument that like reaches to the clouds. That's really cool. However, I highly doubt.
Seems very unrealistic considering they hadn't invented the pulley. Like
5 to 10 meters.
Yeah.
They're going to fight God with 5 to 10 meters.
They vastly underestimated how high up the sky was.
Not to get sidetracked, but to get sidetracked. I've always imagined, because like they've seen hills before, they know what a mountain is, so they're like, because if you go to the area, it's not like on a mountain.
No, not at all.
So no one was like, why don't we get a head start over there, like on a hill? They're like, no, we're starting in this valley.
Which it's kind of how it went too. Like when you think about the story, it says they went into a plain, so they found the flattest possible place they could in Mesopotamia and decided this. Like, I want to point out, by the way, they started this journey on top of a mountain. Like
You're right.
the ark lands on top of a mountain, and they go really far down. Like all the way to Babylon is not that far from the Persian Gulf. Like,
right.
It's not that far away. So you gotta wonder what they were thinking there. After we have them, God being upset about the language, we get to this part, and I actually translated this word for word from Hebrew. It took me an hour because I don't speak Hebrew. So 11:7 in Genesis. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. I spent probably an hour and a half today actually translating word for word, because that seemed like a weird sentence to me. So I looked up the Hebrew, I translated the Hebrew word for word, looked at all the possible variations of what that word could use in Hebrew, wrote out all of the sentences that you could possibly form with this combination of words, and then distilled it down to see what made sense when you actually put it together. And what we got was, more directly, let us remove from their language that no man will hear the lips of another, or let us wilt from their language, their as in location, that no man will hear the language of another, which I translated into modern English as let us confuse their lips that no man will comprehend the language of another. So that's what God is doing here. And here's where the rational historian side of me comes in. At this time in history,
Fed part. Yeah.
Sure. No. At this time in history, we could make the assumption, if we're talking about a period when we're just after the flood, there could be one of two situations. We could be talking about this is just Shem and his descendants, and that's it. That's all who's here. Or we could be talking about a tribe of people, and we could be looking at a situation where this is not immediately after the flood, but several hundred years after the flood. Because, again, we don't get a very specific, detailed account of, time regarding the flood to now. We just get generations. And the Bible can be nebulous about its generations. So what you find is that this could be a time, the way I look at it, that maybe not everybody spoke the same language, but the same language with many different dialects. And that this could have been taking each of those dialects, which might have had a sort of a common tongue, together. If you look at Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, lots of works of modern fiction, you get that there's usually an ethnic tongue and a common tongue. So I wonder if there was kind of that kind of thing going on back at this point in human history. Because it would make sense if humans, even if we go with the theory of evolution, if we look at it and we say, okay, well, humans all evolved in the same area, they would have made that bridge to speech together before they left.
Right.
So all languages, if we're going by the accepted current theory of evolution or the biblical side of things, all languages must stem from one proto-language. If that's the case, then we get to this point, and it's entirely possible that you could have a bunch of different small dialects, but a one common proto-language that they were all speaking. And I don't think this necessarily has to mean that there were no differentiations in language up until that point, but that God might have further disrupted it. One of the words that I found in here was tyrannize, which I thought was interesting. For instead of confuse or confound, I found tyrannize and oppress.
Interesting.
So again, biblical translations are very broad in many cases. You can have, like I said, there was the difference between let us collect from them the languages and let us tyrannize the language. So all from the same set of words. So you can get a very, very broad set of meanings, and you've got to find the one that makes the most sense. Which to me was confuse. I couldn't find a direct translation for confound, interestingly enough. But yeah, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left to go off to build the city. Therefore, that is the name of it, called Babel, or Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So the story that we get is these guys decided to play Minecraft and try and reach God, and as a result, we all speak different languages now.
Thank you for that.
Figured that was the best way to explain it.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
I hate that, but you're not.
But I did come up with a sheet here.
Oh boy! Whoa! My man busted out the sheet.
Yeah, and here's what I came up with, because I want to get into this in a second. But what I did with this sheet, and I want to bring it up now so I don't forget to bring it up later, is I did the math for Joseph, because I have another fun thing to talk about in the second half of the show, which I'm sure you've heard about, but I didn't mention it. But I did the math to figure out how we could figure out about when the Tower of Babel was built, and it's really crazy how accurate the dating is. If the Tower of Babel is the city of Babylon, there's some wild stuff we're gonna get to, so stick around.
Okay.
But yeah, so I want to talk now. I want to shift over now that we've established what the Tower of Babel was and why it happened, and how we went from everyone being one people and one language to people being spread across the face of the earth to Nimrod, because Nimrod gets brought up again in Chronicles. You want to take it away with Nimrod?
I am actually not that knowledgeable on Nimrod. I know most of that historically. A lot of the depictions that were done in literature after him, like I know him from the Tower of Babel story, but I know a lot of the depictions afterwards depict him as a giant, which
I think I have a reason for that.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. All right.
So, many of these depictions are from the medieval period or later. We do have some older depictions of biblical figures, but the Iconoclast controversy kind of was what allowed people to actually make icons and to draw figures in a way that they hadn't really been sure if they were allowed to do that before. The Iconoclast controversy, for those who don't know, was a medieval controversy between the Orthodox and Catholic churches, where basically one side said it's okay to have drawings and depictions of God and Christ, and the other side said that's not okay. It may have been partially because of the Islamic stuff that was going on with them not being able to draw Muhammad that actually brought this to the forefront, but there's a number of things that go into it. It's a very complicated subject. I'll get into that with like Stakuyi or something, somebody who's history oriented. But yeah, so the word that gets used in a lot of these different translations, especially in English, but in many of the other languages as well, you get Nephilim from Genesis translated to mighty men or giants. And then you have the term mighty men used elsewhere in the Bible that is translated from different Hebrew words. So you get a situation where the people who were depicting it usually weren't actually Bible scholars themselves. It was usually trained artists with the advice of priests and scholars. So when they were drawing these things, they were reading the book that was in front of them and saying, all right, well, these were mighty men, and the giants are mighty men, and Nimrod's also a mighty man, so he must be a giant. But in reality, we're looking at different words. Nephilim was used for the mighty men of Genesis 6. I don't know the words that are used for mighty men in 10 and in Genesis 10 and Chronicles, but it's not Nephilim. Nephilim only appears, I think, 3 times. Twice in Genesis and 1 in Kings. 1 Kings, I think.
Interesting.
So we're looking at different mighty men, but it's easy to see where the mix-up could have happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why they thought Nimrod was a giant. I always wondered that, because he's in Dante's Inferno, which I have a bit of a thing for.
I've noticed.
In Dante's Inferno, he is beneath the 8th layer of hell, and he is one of the giants that's chained up, and he can't be understood because, according to Dante, God confounded Nimrod's language to everyone, so no one can understand him. I thought that was interesting, but I always wondered why he's a giant. The other question I have about him is, how does he get into mythology? Because Nimrod's also the name of the great hunter, correct?
So that's the thing, where he's actually mentioned by name in Genesis and in Chronicles, he's referred to as a mighty hunter, as a great hunter.
Oh, okay. I did not know. See,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with his reference in Chronicles, so I did not know that.
Yeah,
interesting.
So let me snag that.
While you're finding it, can I tell the Bugs Bunny thing about it? Oh, you don't know that?
No.
Okay, so for everyone watching, you know, all right, all right. So colloquially, if I was to call you a Nimrod, what would that mean?
That I'm an idiot. That I'm stupid.
Yeah, it means idiot, right? So it's like, where does
it's a great Green Day album.
Correct. Where does the connection go where Nimrod went from great hunter to idiot or nincompoop or whatever? And it comes from the 1930s Looney Tunes episode, Open Season. That it was the original cartoon with Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny. At the beginning of that cartoon, Bugs Bunny's chewing on a carrot, and Elmer Fudd walks up, and Bugs Bunny said, "What's up, Nimrod?" He was being sarcastic, referring to Elmer Fudd as a great hunter, but audiences never heard of Nimrod before, so they just assumed it was an insult that meant idiot. So because of that sarcastic joke from Bugs Bunny, forever in modern English, Nimrod means idiot, because people just thought that's what it meant.
I just always assumed it was a biblical reference because he did something so monumentally stupid.
It was by one connection, by one degree of separation.
Because
Bugs Bunny did that, yeah.
I hate that so much. that is so upsetting to me. Also, somebody in chat just asked to see the reference to Nephilim and Kings, so I want to see if I can find it.
Is it?
It's talking about
what is it? What's the word that's used whenever it talks about...
Oh, wait, no,
like,
I was wrong. It's in Numbers. It's in Numbers. I knew it was a Torah book. I don't know why I said Kings.
I was about to say, so what like language is used when it talks about like Goliath?
Goliath is not Nephilim. They do not use the word Nephilim. It's just giant or mighty men. I think it's the same verbiage that they use, if I remember correctly, that they use for Nimrod when they say he's a mighty man.
Interesting.
So I don't know for certain because I don't have it in front of me. But yeah, so Numbers 13:32. I don't know which version they're using, so
interesting.
Let's see. In Hebrew, so that's the I don't know if I don't think this is the KJV just because it's the verbiage here. But 13:32-33, where 10 of the 12 spies report that they have seen fearsome giants in Canaan, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Probably an exaggeration, but basically what they're saying is...
That was the same report where they said they saw grapes the size of their head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is... There's a whole bunch of wild stuff.
Land flowing with milk and honey.
That's what we should do for the next one, honestly, is we should talk about Numbers, because it's one of the most understudied books of the Bible.
That'd be kind of cool. I did a message out of Numbers not long ago, and my favorite thing about it is it like takes a bunch of the stories from the Old Testament, like mentioned in Exodus, and then like expands on them. Like when you read the Exodus account of what caused the children of Israel to walk around in Egypt, it just says that Moses went to a rock, he smote it, and then the people of Israel walked around the desert. But whenever you read the Numbers account of it, it talks the whole thing about how Moses was furious at God and furious at the people. And he smote the rock twice. And God said, as you have smote me, and all that. So like I like Numbers a lot because it's kind of like an inner look at stuff you would already be familiar with if you had read to that point.
And on top of that, it was not originally called Numbers. That's the English translation of the Septuagint name for the book. The Septuagint refers to it as Numbers because there's so many numbers in it. Originally, the name of the book was, I can't pronounce the Hebrew, but the English translation directly would be In the Wilderness.
Ooh! So I didn't know! Bro, that's cool!
It makes complete sense, though, right? Like, you think about it, you're like, oh,
it's about them. It's about the time that they were roaming about in the wilderness. Yeah,
exactly.
Wow, very cool.
And because you got to remember chronologically, and I'm going to get into why this is so important in a couple minutes, but chronologically, that makes complete sense, because Genesis was written first, because you got to you got to lay out the story of how we got to Exodus. Then Exodus gets written. Exodus is, of course, the story of the Exodus from Egypt. It's the thing that just happened, that they just went through. Right. Big event, but it's not trying to tell the story of what happened as they got other places. It's telling the story of how they got out of Egypt and what rules developed as a result, essentially.
It's very mechanical.
Yes, it's very... The 5 books of the Pentateuch of the Torah are... They have different purposes, and I think a lot of people overlook that, and they think that these are just, like, chronological. No, Genesis obviously takes place before everything else. It's the beginning. But Exodus and Numbers overlap, and then so do Deuteronomy and Leviticus, because Deuteronomy and Leviticus are both more about law, whereas Numbers is kind of a story about them getting to Canaan, and Exodus is the story of them getting out of Egypt. So, what was I about to say?
You were talking about Numbers, why it's... its function, its purpose.
Right, yes. I got completely lost.
I killed you with the Bugs Bunny thing. You were
Bugs Bunny thing.
You were looking up. You were looking up.
Yeah.
Him in the book, the Chronicles, right?
Yes, it was Numbers 13. Yeah. So that's when it gets brought up. As for the rest of all of this. This is, and we're gonna do something that seems a lot like we're sidetracking, but I promise it comes back. Okay, so have you heard about the recent discovery of that little curse tablet in Israel?
What?
So I can't remember if it's stamped bronze or if it's either copper, bronze, or ceramic. I think it's copper. Archaeologists working at Mount Ebal in Israel found a tiny 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter tablet made of, I believe, beaten copper that has a curse written on it. And it's pretty repetitive. It basically says, "You are cursed by Yahweh, Yahweh's curse upon you." What's important about it...
Yahweh!
What's important about it is that it comes from Mount Ebal and is tentatively, it has not been peer-reviewed yet, but because this just came out in, like, March, tentatively, it has been dated to around 1200 BC. Mount Ebal, in Deuteronomy, is known as a place, they say, to put the curse upon Mount Ebal. Apparently, they meant that very literally, because there is a curse tablet on Mount Ebal. And it's been dated, tentatively, to 1200 BC. Now, the dating for the Exodus itself is kind of contentious. There's anything ranging from 1600 BC up through 1200 BC up to it never actually even happened. That last one is kind of out the window. There's almost no way that this didn't happen. But what there is a way that happened is that when Jacob went into Egypt, he brought only 70 souls with him. So Jacob, whose name is also Israel, goes into Egypt with 70 souls. And over the course of the 400 years that they are afflicted in Egypt, as was prophesied to Abraham, they multiply, but they're not going to be that much. If we assume 3 children per household, 4-5 generations, we're not running that high. We're just above replacement rate. We're looking at just over 1,000 people probably. So it makes sense that them arriving with just 70 would not have been recorded by the Egyptians, and that them leaving with 1,500 would also probably not be recorded by the Egyptians, especially when we take into account the timing. Because if this tablet is 1,200 BC, not only does that make it possible that these books were actually written physically by Moses, but it also tells us that the Jews left Egypt during the Bronze Age collapse, which completely makes sense. What that does is if you do the math as I did,
if you do the math,
and you travel back, so we believe, if we go with the idea that Moses and the Jews left Egypt in 1200, and we dial that back 400 years. We get to about 1600. The way that it's phrased in Exodus is that there was a Pharaoh who knew Joseph not, and he's the one that enslaved the Jews. Because the pharaohs who knew Joseph loved Joseph. Joseph was great. Right. He was the king of dreams. He had the Technicolor Dreamcoat. So Joseph probably would have been born sometime around 1700, give or take 20 years, depending on how literally you take the ages in the Bible. Now, the tail end of biblical ages is up for debate, because we get people who, even after the flood, when the Earth's climate would have been massively changed, are still living 500-600 years. Shem lives to be 600. I can't pronounce Arpachshad's name properly, but he lives to be 438. Shelah is 437. Eber is 464. So on and so forth. Now, the ages, the average age does get lower and lower across the generations, but what you find if you look at the dates at which they are supposed to have had their children, their first children, what you get is that you trace it back 624 years across the generations from Jacob back to Shem. Which places, since Shem seems to be the person that was there when the Tower of Babel was being built,
right,
it places the foundation of the town that would become Babylon sometime around 2300 BC. Modern archaeologists have determined, through modern archaeology, that Babylon was founded around 2300 BC. On top of that, I could not find evidence that the Egyptians recorded the foundation of Babylon. Now, the Sumerians would have recorded the foundation of Babylon. Of course they would have. But the Jews didn't spend a ton of time in Egypt, they did spend a ton of time in Egypt. They didn't spend a ton of time in Babylon until the Babylonian exile. So, what that then implies is that the Jews, who, if, again, we gotta make the point here that if this tablet is as old as it is, that means that the Jews were literate in 1200 BC, which means that Moses could have himself written down the Bible. It also means that other people of the time, even if it wasn't Moses himself, could have written down the stories of the Bible. So Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus could all date to as early as 1200 BC in their earliest written forms. Babylonian exile is in the 500s BC, which means that there is absolutely no way that they got this story during the Babylonian exile. So what that means is that they knew somehow. How did Moses know? He didn't know from Egypt. Seems like he didn't know from anywhere else. It's probably one of the better arguments for divine revelation that's ever been made, is that Moses, 1100 years later, knew about this.
You're talking about he knew about the Tower of Babel.
That he knew that he got the date right.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because given the years that Moses listed, it lines up across the board for being
almost
the perfect
perfectly
date that Babylon would have started.
It is, let me see. We get did the math, where did I do the math? There's the math. We get 2324 would be the date of the Tower of Babylon if we go back to Shem.
Okay.
Sargon of Akkad ruled the Akkadian Empire. Not that Sargon of Akkad.
I know.
Sargon of Akkad.
That name drop, right? Go ahead.
Sargon of Akkad ruled the Akkadian Empire from around the year 2334 to 2279. Sargon of Akkad was arguably the world's first emperor. Like, true emperor. If anyone had the power to construct a tower that reached to heaven, it was going to be the man who styled himself King of the Universe. So, I think that when you look at the timing and the people who we know of, and of course, there's no reason that Nimrod and Sargon of Akkad have to actually be different people. I haven't found historical reference to a King Nimrod.
So you're saying that it's possible, given the dates and all that Sargon of Akkad is Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
or at least being compared to Nimrod. Okay. Somebody goes, "Oh boy, here we go again." The second I brought out the paper. But yeah, so I just, as I was researching it, I was
interesting.
like, that is fascinating that the timeline lines up the way it does. And it's not the only time that happens in the Bible. There's a lot of times where you actually investigate the specific numbers of everything, and you find that they seem to know what was going on oddly well. Also the same thing with Plato and Atlantis, where Plato says it was 9,000 years before the time of Solon. Solon lived in 600 BC. 9,000 years before 600 BC was 11,600, which we now know was the dating of Meltwater Pulse 1b, which is very likely the Great Flood to which every culture alludes.
I love it when you do that.
What?
Just go on the whole tirade.
I gotta do it. I gotta connect all the thoughts.
Comes so natural. I love it. That's fantastic.
It's the untreated ADHD.
So you were talking about Joseph, right?
Yeah.
Brought him up in his placement in it.
Mm-hmm.
What timeline then would that give about that, the exile from Egypt? You're saying that by the time Moses was there, 1200 BC, they would have shown up. The 70 souls is mentioned around what time?
1600.
Around 1600. So they're there for 400 years.
Because the 70 souls show up after Joseph has already ingratiated himself into Pharaoh's court.
Correct. Yeah. After because they get there and he's already like the second in command.
He's the vizier of Egypt. Yeah, he's like the second in command is very accurate.
Which for those that don't know, what happened there is Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery because they hated him. I think it's what 20 years, 30 years go by.
Yeah, something like that.
It's like decades go by, right? And then those brothers travel to Egypt just on a whim to go buy food.
I think the reasoning was the famine, that the famine was affecting everywhere, and
yes.
Egypt actually still had food because of Joseph.
Because of Joseph, yeah, because Joseph figured out how to store food and all that. So the brothers are like, oh, we have to go to Egypt to get this food. So the brothers just show up, and the brother that they sold into slavery is now the second in command of all of Egypt.
It really is like you just like you're starting an RPG and you just got all the way through. Like it's like you're playing World of Warcraft and invited your buddies. They were like, nah, that's nerdy. 10 years later, they decide to join, and you're like Grand Master of the largest guild. Like,
bro, it's so funny because like I wish more people. Like, I understand, why religion bad or whatever, but like it's so cool. The stories are so objectively cool. In the same like stretch of reading, like you could sit down and do in an evening, you saw a group of people try to fight God, and then they can't speak, and then over here the slave brother becomes king of Egypt. Like...
It's the Bible lore is so incredible. I always say if the Bible was written as a fantasy novel today, it would be a bestseller immediately.
Right. Well, it is the bestseller.
Oh, it's also it's already the best-selling book of all time.
It is the bestseller, yeah.
But it's just like around a little bit and gave it back to you, and people were like, "This is the greatest work of all time."
It's funny because the screen's frozen now, and I think I died.
You're still here.
Oh, okay. Okay, I came back. All right, it was frozen for a second. I'm good now.
You were frozen, looking about like.
It's funny because you froze and then it said everything that you had said in that period of time in 5 seconds. It was like I was talking to God, but now we're good.
Oh my gosh. Oh, all right. So
that was fantastic. Love that. I love the idea that it perfectly lines up with the dates of everything.
Yeah, it's just fascinating that he got that right.
Yeah. That actually. So I do think, if I remember correctly, it directly says that Moses wrote at least part.
It's an Exodus.
Like the
I think it's Exodus 17.
Yeah. Yes, it talks about him transcribing it or whatever. And
But
it
for so
specifically
long.
mentions.
Go on.
Yeah. It mentions that God gives him revelation of what he's writing, like gives him the divine knowledge. Because how else is he going to write about, the Garden of Eden? But God gives him knowledge of what he's writing down. So I definitely believe that he would have done something as specific as give him like the dates and the generations and the years and all that, which is very cool.
Yeah, and I think that the Jewish way of like recording time at this period is so cool too. Doing it as like this patriarch was born at this time and then lived this long. Like I just think that that's a really interesting way of timing things out, because like if you look at the way the ancient Egyptians recorded time, it's always the same kind of idea, but it's like in the 10th year of Pharaoh's reign.
Right.
Also, it makes you got to wonder, like, I do have curiosity about why Moses does not include the names of the pharaohs. That one escapes me.
I think, so we talked about this before on the podcast, that there are a lot of names that don't line up because they just had different names.
Mm-hmm.
That was a common culture thing. Like, I think we talked about Daniel, and how like Daniel does exist in historical canon as being like the second in command from the region with, and like who Darius may be and all that. But Daniel's not called Daniel. Darius is not called Darius because that is the Hebrew names as it was transcribed. And there's a couple mentions of like named leaders throughout the Old Testament, and it's the same way with them. I think the only reason Moses didn't include the name is because, I guess in a way, it didn't matter. Like, obviously to us it matters because we're nerds who like to look into the history and everything of it, but within the story Moses is telling, it is the people of God versus Pharaoh, versus the office of Pharaoh and the people of Pharaoh and all that.
And they do the same thing with other terms, like Babylon gets used a lot in the Old Testament. I see a lot, even in like I think it's in Revelation as well, but you see people talking about like Babylon as this enemy, as this adversary. And a lot of people take that literally, and when you read through the book, it becomes very clear that Babylon, they're using that as a metaphor. Babylon is because the Babylonians were probably the most like catastrophic thing to ever happen to a lot of these people. So you just end
that's
up
that's a way to word it. The murderers and execution.
But then when you get to Revelation, it does the same thing with Rome. It also uses Babylon. But it does the same thing with Rome, where they talk about, this about Rome and the beast from the sea and all that. And people have inaccurately attributed that to being about Nero, which there's absolutely no reason that Revelation would be about Nero whatsoever. It makes no sense. It's probably the dumbest conspiracy theory about the Bible that I've ever heard in my life. And it drives me nuts when I hear people who have a following talk about it, because I'm like, that is so far off the mark if you're an actual historian. Like, first of all, Nero was absolutely dead like when Revelation was written, and no, nobody thought Nero was coming back. If you look at the time, like, nobody thought Nero was coming back. That was not something going on in people's heads. There were rumors he wasn't actually dead, but like, there's no reason that people in let's see, Patmos is off the coast of Turkey, I believe, so there's no reason that people in Roman Anatolia would be worried about Nero coming back. Like, it makes no sense. So sorry for the tangent, but they do the same thing with Rome, and you get a lot of instances when there's an adversary, it's usually not named specifically, and they do it even with Satan. You don't get Satan's name. Like, it's not there. You just get Satan over and over again. Satan, of course, in Hebrew just means adversary.
I think a lot of this comes back to that conversation we had where the Bible's like primary purpose is to explain to a less than divine being like the concepts of salvation and existence and all of that. So I think if instead of Satan, the Bible was to instead describe the exact office and figure of the legions of hell, I think it would be much more confusing and more people would get hung up on it. There's
so, and you gotta, one of the things that we come back to a lot on this show is that you've got to remember that everything that's in this book, up until you get to Revelation, which is kind of specifically the one book where they're like, you're not gonna understand anything in here, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. If you look through the rest of it, it's really given to you in a way that it's like the way you'll understand it. And I think that's important, and I think it's an important distinction with Revelation, because you get to Revelation and it makes no sense. Could you imagine if the entire book was like that? Like, if God had just been like, all right, I'm gonna level with you. There are six-winged, many-eyed creatures in the sky.
You know, honestly,
and they're just always watching you.
It may kind of be the answer once you think about it, right? Because it's like, why doesn't he name Satan specifically? Why doesn't he name blah 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 specifically and all that? It's like, okay, well, here's what specifically looks like. this last book of the Bible. This is what the detail looks like. Do you want that everywhere?
Exactly.
Or do you need to know what happened to Moses and the children of Israel?
And on top of that, like, you know, what these books are, and I think something that's important for people who maybe aren't as well versed with the book need to understand, is that the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is actually broken up into 3 different sections, 3 different types of literature. You've got the law, which is the Torah or the Pentateuch, which is that, you know, that first 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Leviticus. And then you've got the prophets and the writings. And so the prophets are all the books that are obviously written about prophets, and the writings are things like Psalms and Proverbs. So when you look at those, they actually each have different levels of detail. If you go into some of the books that are more historical, like Chronicles or Kings or Judges, those ones are all like, they give you specific names and places. Whereas if you go with Genesis and Exodus, which aren't really, they're not history texts, they're legal text. So they're really just giving you the reason behind the law. They don't need to give you the exact pharaoh because it doesn't matter, I guess is the best way that it makes sense to me. Like, you get hung up on the names.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Like again, the purpose of the Bible is to explain Christ in the long term, like the reason for his coming, everything that led up to and afterwards. The idea of it being entirely descriptive and nothing more, like, imagine if the entire Bible was like Deuteronomy, like, yeah, that'd probably get a little bogged down.
Also could you imagine this book, but it's full of weird rules about what linen you can wear?
My favorite's when people do that too. Everyone's like, oh, Christianity, let me one up you on this, huh?
Yeah.
Fabrics. Bet you never thought that one. Bet you never heard of that one. What about eating shellfish?
Yeah.
It's like, bro,
it's like
you're in a different league.
My guy.
Oh no, why am I not following this specific set of rules set for this group of people
in this specific location at this specific time?
Yeah.
Man,
why didn't I think of that?
It blows people's minds when I tell them that Mosaic law is not supposed to apply to Second Temple Jews or Christians or Rabbinic Jews. Like they keep certain parts of the law, but there's also certain parts that, like, were written for a specific time period. You're not supposed to eat pork, probably because they didn't know how to handle trichinosis. Like, that's also written right next to don't eat blood. It was clearly like a set of, like, don't do this for your own sake kind of rules. The linen one I don't get. I don't get why you're not supposed to wear, like, 2 different kinds of linen at the same time. That one is beyond me.
I don't know. I have always envisioned that in my head to be something to do with the process of making it. I don't know, though.
That's what I thought. It had to be something about, like, wasting resources or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's the only way it makes sense.
But it was specifically for one group of people once at a time. And to this day, people are like, huh, look at you wearing denim. Huh. You call yourself a Christian? Like, what are you talking
you got me.
about? You got me. Woohoo.
Listen, if I get up to the pearly gates and Christ looks at me and he goes, why are you wearing jeans? I didn't die for this. You know what? That's, like, I'm not going to have an answer for him. But
like, I'm sorry.
Like, that was not my intention. I like all of your work. I just felt like the jeans were comfy. Like,
I'm a big fan of your work.
Oh, you're a Christian? Name 3 of Jesus's hits. Like, you know, that's what it feels like. Name 3 of the Beatitudes.
Hate you.
Like, that's what it is. This is just gatekeeping Jesus. Like, gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, Christ, I guess.
I hate you so much. Those are the 3 Beatitudes.
Yeah. Thou shalt gaslight, thou shalt gatekeep, and thou shalt girl boss.
That was the closest thing to blasphemy I've done on this show. So
there's a fine line between blasphemy and explaining things in terms people will understand, I've found.
I had a legit question. You threw. Oh yeah. I was going to ask you, because I know you're more versed in this than I am, the specifics of it. I understand that Judaism cuts out, like, pretty much the entirety of the Christian New Testament because obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But how much of the Old Testament is the same between us? Like, the whole thing, or?
So Christians are missing certain books, but the reasoning is not that they decided that those books weren't important, but rather that those books were not scriptural. So, for example, Maccabees. Maccabees is one of the ones that's constantly left out of Christian Bibles. It's not because Maccabees is inaccurate. It's not because Maccabees is about something that didn't happen. It's because Maccabees is about the Maccabean revolt of like 168 to 164 BC. It's not a book about God. It's not a book about God's rules or God's laws. It's not prophecy. It's literally just a history book about a significant event in Jewish history. So
I see what you're saying. So
the Christians took it out. You can still get it. It's not like the church hides the existence of Maccabees. It's just not included in the book. And a lot
considered relevant.
Yeah, and you got to remember, a lot of the reason that books were left out of the Bible was how much effort it took to replicate a Bible. People like to ascribe it to like conspiracy or the church hiding things. I've heard that like there used to be 88 books of the Bible or 82 books of the Bible or 72 books of the Bible. It's like, yeah, the church didn't take them out because they were trying to hide them from you. The church took them out because up until the 1500s, you had to handwrite Bibles all the way through. So
correct.
People really do not understand the importance of the printing press. It changed everything for humanity. If you look at the acceleration in technology, in philosophy, in just about any human aspect of life, anything we do that requires communication, it all rapidly accelerates after the printing press into unprecedented speeds. This is how we go from not having cars to having an airplane in 30 years.
Yeah. It's wild because it's like the first way humanity could ever catch each other up to speed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was like one person could read a book and have an infinitely larger knowledge pool than his neighbor.
Exactly.
But now, because of the printing press, everyone can begin to actually develop society and culture moving forward.
That said, I feel like we are reaching the point of maybe the printing press was a mistake. Every time I open Twitter...
We've gone too far.
We've gone too far. The printing
Literacy,
press...
maybe not the best.
Great idea. Everyone having access to it, maybe not great. Maybe we shouldn't have done that one.
People to read? No.
If you could go back and do one thing, what would it be? No more literacy. It's gone. It's done.
I imagine all those old priests and stuff like having to transcribe the Bible. It's like someone comes, it's like, oh yeah, why are you cutting that out? And their hands are bleeding.
Exactly.
Don't make me do it again.
You had monks who would like start their training in childhood and just would spend their entire lives, all they would do was write like 4 Bibles. But they'd be beautiful.
Right, yeah,
like,
they're gorgeous.
The writing would be just absolutely gorgeous. It was in Latin. They had the illuminations all over the place. One thing that I learned in college that I thought was super interesting, everyone always thinks of medieval Ireland as being really poor. There's this misconception that Ireland has just always been super poor. That's thanks to the English lying about Ireland's history to make themselves feel better, as they are wont to do.
Those Englanders again.
So in reality, you have a lot of Bibles from Ireland that are inlaid with these beautiful silver knots and like designs, and it's silver. It is silver. Like, it is precious metal and emeralds and all this just beautiful stuff in these Bibles that are literally like this big. And then over in Scotland, they're using pewter. In England, they're using, diluted silver or steel. Like, they're just using completely different metals, because Ireland was so fabulously wealthy, just all of the wealth was held within, like, the churches, because everything else was chaos. Because if we're being honest about Irish history, everything else was chaos. It's an absolutely wild place to study. It's just the edge of the world, people doing whatever they felt like. There's just sailing over to Britain and picking up random Welsh people to make them slaves. The Welsh have had a rough time, man.
They really have.
It's like
picking up slaves.
Literally got there like pre-Bronze Age and just have been getting screwed over ever since. I feel like there was
like that,
one
the pain of a well.
There was like one last thing I wanted to talk about before we switch over to questions, but I am struggling to find it.
We talked Joseph.
Yeah.
Talked.
Maybe we covered everything I wanted to cover.
That's the only thing you mentioned in the first half, and then I kind of sidetracked talking about Old Testament Judaism.
Yeah, no, that's such a it's a fascinating topic, and people think that like
it is cool.
You talk to modern people, especially non-Jews, but even some Jews will not like totally get how much Judaism has evolved over time. It starts off as like just this very basic monotheistic religion. There's God, and these are God's people, and that's it. And then over time, you get all these different rules and regulations and prophets and conquests, and it's just
favorite prophet. Putting you on the hot seat. Favorite prophet.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm gonna be honest. Even though he's not quite as like intense as Ezekiel or Isaiah, Daniel. Because of that one scene, the one scene we talked about in the first episode of this show, where he's just in the feast room, just laying into everybody there, because he knows nobody's gonna do anything about it. He's like, "I'm right. I told you so." Like that's it. That's the whole thing. I love it.
It's so metal for him to be standing there. And they're like, "What does this mean?" And he reads it and he turns around and goes, "You did it again." Like, oh, wow, that's so fantastic.
Y'all may have screwed up a bit. Like, I'm trying to find it because I want to read that bit, but I can't find the book of Daniel in my book.
I've got it.
There's Daniel.
Somewhere. It's like chapter 9 or something, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Daniel's pretty short, which is nice.
Yeah. The second half of it's just prophecy. It's right before the lion's den, which is 10, I think. That's a cool story, too. He gets thrown to the lions, and he's like, "Hey, king, how you doing?"
Exactly. He's just vibing, Let's see, where is it? It's at Belteshazzar's feast, right?
Yes, yeah.
It's 5. I want to find the specific bit.
Such a. That's maybe.
By
my
the way,
favorite
this
thing
is.
ever.
Oh yeah. By the way, we're getting to the question time section. So if you've got questions while I look for this specific passage from Daniel, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll read super chats first, and then we'll get to everything else if we have time. We go until 8:30. Please ask us questions. You get this show once a month. Make the best use of it. Let's see. We got Daniel 6, Daniel 5.
My favorite prophet, by the way, is Elijah. While you're looking for that,
go into it in a second, but first I just want to talk about
go
the
ahead.
KJV title for this. Not the whole chapter, but this section. Daniel's contribution to the feast. Announcement of doom. I'm gonna read these. I'm gonna read these to you because oh my gosh, they are fantastic. So it's chapter 5 of Daniel, and we get Belteshazzar's feast, right? Belteshazzar's the KJV breaks it up by contribution. Belteshazzar's contribution to the feast: unrestrained sensuality.
Unrestrained. Oh no.
God's contribution to the feast: handwriting on the wall. Daniel's contribution to the feast: announcement of doom.
Announcement of doom. Fantastic.
I think there's one more. Yeah, Darius's contribution to the feast: the destruction of Babylon.
I was about to say, didn't Darius kill them?
He does. If I remember correctly, he actually does invade and kill them all that night.
Kills them all. Yeah, it says they were hiding in the rivers of the city. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get. It's like hilarious. A story in 4 parts: unrestrained sensuality, handwriting on the wall, announcement of doom, and destruction of Babylon. These all sound like 90s metal bands.
Oh, that's fantastic. Destruction of Babylon is a hard.
Yeah, that would go hard. That's another band name. Announcement of Doom would be a good Ghost album.
That's fantastic.
I love the sequence of events here. We get the unrestrained sensuality, and then you can just picture it. There's like everyone's just having a raucous old time, just vibing, drinking, being sensual with one another. And then just, suddenly it goes really quiet and there's just a hand writing on the wall. and you can just feel the intensity as like the music swells, and then Daniel's just like, "You're all gonna die."
You have 3 hours.
And then everyone's probably like, ah. And you can just imagine like somebody being stabbed by some Persian with a spear who's like, damn, he's good. Like,
it's one of the most heartbreaking parts of the story to me. So Belteshazzar gives David his robes. Daniel. He gives Daniel the robes. Like, oh, thank you for interpreting it. Like, as a reward of sorts. Knowing that Daniel's interpretation is that he's about to die. Yeah. And he does.
But
that's such a good story.
He did have the opportunity to not set himself up for that. Like,
yeah, well, whenever you're having a giant group sensuality, which every time I do that lesson in Sunday school, I have to quickly brush over that.
I thought you were going to say every time I have my giant group session of sensuality.
No.
Every time I have a giant sensuality party.
We use this for reference. No, but like whenever that's happening and like... and you lost. Oh, he's having the group sensuality thing. And he's like, you know what? You know what we're missing? We're missing the jewels and metals from the temple of God. Let's bring those in here and we'll burn them to our little statues.
It's kind of one of those things that you're like, even... Like, I don't believe in any of the pagan gods, but I wouldn't go to, like, an altar of Thor and burn sacred Norse artifacts.
Right, yeah.
Partially because that's simply a rude thing to do.
Yeah.
And partially because I don't want to tempt fate.
Right, yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure.
You know, like...
But still.
Yeah, it's, what is it, Pascal's Wager, right?
Yeah. It is more beneficial to believe in God because the consequences of him existing are more severe than the consequences of him not existing.
Exactly. Yeah. But just apply that to any God and you've got the same thing. Like,
right.
You know, it's believe in your own, but maybe don't disrespect the other ones. That might not go so well if you're wrong.
Right. That story. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So they're burning, the pieces of God, and then God comes around. Oh, the painting, and this is to tie the whole thing back in. The painting, the Feast of Belteshazzar, is my favorite painting ever because it shows like the hand writing on the wall. It shows like the king having his feast and the sensuality everywhere. It shows all the fires, but way off in the distance of the painting, you can see the Tower of Babel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, the idea that they were building monuments to man then, and they're doing it again now. And God writing his hand on the walls the same as confounding the language. So good. I love this stuff.
Biblical art is some of the most incredible...
Oh, man.
Like...
Ooh.
Oh, and, like, the Sistine Chapel? The Notre Dame? Like, you... Oh, my...
A lot of people, like, it's kind of overdone, the whole image of God touching man, but like looking at that entire image in full scape, it is breathtaking.
The whole thing all at once is just like all right, so let's get to those. There's a few super chats from earlier that I want to get to. So from Plaz for $5, thank you, Plaz. The language confounding could be God pulling cleanup duty on Nephilim Grigori influence. I don't know what Grigori is.
The Gregorian, like the calendar?
No,
is that what he's saying?
Grigori. I'm gonna look that up really quick. But you know, given the timing, we're immediately after the flood. You know, the flood was supposed to wipe out all the Nephilim. So,
correct.
If it didn't, I mean, because we do get in Numbers that they use the word Nephilim. So it could be possible that, you know, it didn't get all of them. You know, you got to remember that as much as this is the divinely inspired word of God, there were human hands touching it. There's always the possibility for error. You know, and I will never attribute error to God, but I will certainly attribute some of that error to mankind if it ever pops up. I'm trying to look up Grigori. Here we go. Okay. Grigori. Well, it was Rasputin's first name.
That's what he meant. He was
okay. It's another word for the Watchers.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Book of Enoch gives them some weird punishments. There's like, and I saw 2 angels spinning in a bottomless pit, and they were as mountains, and you're like, What's that mean?
What is going on here?
Yeah, I keep forgetting to do it. I'll probably start doing it this weekend. I'm just I'm gonna do a read through of Enoch for the channel. I don't know. Depending on how it goes, I might add some sound effects in. I don't really know. We also did an episode of Drunk Folklore, which is going on our Patreon, where I talked about Enoch. It wasn't supposed to be about Enoch, and we just got there somehow. Hammond for $2 says Babel is 4RM Semitic language family. I don't know if that's supposed to be from Semitic language family, so it's Ba. So he's confirming that you're correct. For another $2 said, so when Debussy is right, not you, Aidan Matussi. I hate that. Also, it's when Degussy.
Hey, but shut up. Please stop.
The
number of comments I get on a daily basis.
I know. I can only imagine.
No, I know. Yeah, just keep talking.
Cassio Sejuru says Giants in all caps, because...
Okay. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. I do like the Giants meme.
Hammond for another $2. He said,
I see it.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
Me too.
Let's see, where else are we? What do we got? All right, second. We got a new one from Cassio Sejuru, which is reading about Stephen being martyred in Acts really touched me. Despite the immense pain, he kept his eyes on the Lord as heaven itself opened to him. Acts of the Apostles is a hell of a book.
I'm actually doing a study with that for my class right now. We're going through the Book of Acts, looking at the grouping different stories and like talking about them. Like the next one we're talking about this Sunday is going to be over the Paul's witnessing to the first Romans, Cornelius and his court. But 2 weeks ago I covered Stephen, and man, that story, like I knew the story. The specifics of it destroyed me. Okay, are you familiar? All right, I'm glad he mentioned that. Are you familiar with what Stephen says to the court who's standing there?
It's been a while. I don't remember the exact verbiage.
All right, so the short version is that he stands there before, and okay, parallel I drew between the stories is the parallel between Stephen's death and Jesus' death. Because both of them were brought before a court of the Jewish leaders who hated him. Both of them, well, Jesus was dragged to the Romans by the Jewish leaders. And the Romans didn't know who Jesus was, and the Jewish leaders did not know who Stephen was. They simply brought Stephen before him and said that this guy is a heretic, he's speaking against God. So they asked Stephen to explain himself. Stephen proceeds to give them the entire history of the children of Israel. He talks about how they were founded by their father Moses. He talks about how, or by their father Abraham. He talks about how Moses led them out of Egypt. He talks about the prophets. He talks about David and his son Solomon. He talks about how Isaiah prophesied they'd be here. He talks about a lot. He gives the entire Old Testament in a run through, right? And then he looks at the Jewish leaders and says, these were not your fathers. Your fathers were the ones who killed these men. Fathers were the ones who crucified them. Throughout all of these stories, you've done nothing but put away God, just as you killed the Son of God yourselves. And he literally went before the Jewish court, gave them their entire history, and said, you were the bad guys through this entire thing. This was all your fault. And man, it was like, I knew he said something that made them go from who are you to kill him now in like 30 minutes.
I believe
so I knew it had...
Yeah.
Hold on.
Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted, and they have slain them which shewed before the coming of the just one, of whom ye have been the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the disposition of angels and have not kept it. When they heard these things, they were cut to the heart, and they gnashed on him with their teeth. But he, being full of the Holy Ghost, looked up steadfastly into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing on the right hand of God, and said, behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Then they cried out with a loud voice, and stopped their ears, and ran upon him with one accord, and cast him out of the city, and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet, whose name was Saul. And they stoned Stephen, calling upon God, and saying, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. And he kneeled down and cried with a loud voice, Lord, lay not this sin to their charge. and when he had said this, he fell asleep. So what I do love that bit right there, because the very last thing Christ says is, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And Stephen just mimics it. He just, like, the exact same. There is not a more faithful way to follow a person than to, at the moment of dying for their cause, say the exact same thing they said about forgiving their persecutors.
Dude, man, like, gosh, I'm choked up. That gets me so hard, because you have that, like, whenever Peter and the disciples came to the church that was beginning at Jerusalem, he said, bring forth your 10 best. And the first one, or 8 best. And the first one they brought forward was Stephen.
Yeah.
People there said, this is the most righteous guy we have. And the thing that Peter tells him is, he says, in all that you do, be as Christ. Be like Christ. So now Stephen stood there before them and called them out. He said, you were not the good guys of this story. You are now the ones who are done it. And he's given a vision of heaven. As he is being murdered, he does what Peter says. He's like Christ. And he says, Father, forgive them. Man, absolutely cuts to the bone.
It's
my word.
And I think another thing to just impress upon here is, I think a lot of people misunderstand this section of the Bible and will take it and apply it to blaming the Jews for killing Jesus, when what he's saying is not Jews are responsible for this. What he's saying is specifically the class, the Pharisees, the specific priestly class of Judaism who has ignored the law and has used it for their own personal financial gain. That, because you got to remember, he himself was Jewish, like, by faith. At the time, Judaism and Christianity were almost exactly the same thing. We're talking about, like, the immediate aftermath of Christ's death. So, you know, what he's saying there, what he's bringing up is the fact that, like, this ruling class has betrayed their people, has betrayed their faith, has betrayed their God, and he's making that argument to them. It's not to say that Judaism is responsible for the death of Christ, because, again, he probably would have considered himself Jewish.
Right, yeah. Especially because, like, so, yes, what you were saying about it being, like, the original place of Judaism and all that, Paul would later go on to tell the Romans that it is looking at it wrong to view the Jews as killing Christ. Instead, I think he says we have all crucified Christ, or all of humanity crucified Christ. The purpose is it wasn't one group. It was that us as people did it. And here, a Jew telling other Jews is not, oh, the Jews killed Christ. It's him saying the Pharisees, the people who stand before me now, are the ones responsible for his death. And what I love so much about that story, what kills me, is that, like, you know, you hear a lot of talk in the New Testament and from Christians today about, oh, have faith, or, like, whatever you think the solution is, God has it working out. And here we see one of the founding members of the church being executed. But even as he's being executed, God is already setting up the next step at the same time. Saul, who's standing there, holding the coats, like, that is the, the idea that in this point where Stephen is being a testimony for God by dying in the way that Jesus did, the foundation of missions and the church itself is standing there watching him, and he's taking all of that in. And, like, even though Stephen didn't know it at the time, through his testimony, he was building the church in a way he never could have.
In possibly the most significant way he possibly could. Yes. I don't think that you could argue there's a church father who's more important than Paul.
Right. Yeah. Like, man.
I do want to bring one up that wasn't a super chat, but I did catch it. From Gamer Epico. Isaiah, I don't know if you will see this, but you and your content really helped me through the numerous faith crises I've been having. It's really refreshing to see a YouTuber who is a Christian. Thank you.
Aw. Man, you get me while I'm choked up on Paul.
The following one is, you should post more pew pew content so I can convince my boyfriend to watch your channel.
Oh, that's both of you. That's incredibly sweet. About the faith thing, that really does mean a lot. I've seen people in my comments be like, "Oh, where's the Sunday studies or whatever?" But like if you watch the videos, I'm injecting as much as that as possible into the non-Sunday study stuff. Like, if you watch Paradiso, there was clearly some propaganda I was inserting into that, even if unwillingly.
You just gotta keep the propaganda light and subtle, right. You know.
Yeah, right.
I'm not openly telling you in my Missing 411 videos that you should hate the government. I'm just saying the government lies to you.
On that note, and this also goes to the person who said I need more pew pew content. My next video is on Waco.
Oh, good God.
So speaking of propaganda spiced in there. Yeah.
I hope like the Mises Institute or Young Americans for Liberty gives you a sponsorship for that. A risky one. The ATF sure ain't. From Here Come the Pit for $10. Thank you. Don't know if you ever answered this, but do you think the people who lived hundreds of years were the family surviving? I had this exact thought today as I was doing the math. That this could be more the clan that was founded by that person that survived that long. But at the same time, the way it's written, you do have to kind of extrapolate that. If you take it the way it's written, it's talking about specifically these individuals living that long. I personally don't want to give a solid opinion either way because I'm still trying to understand it personally. I don't know, Isaiah, if you have a more definitive belief on it.
I don't think so, because normally when it talks about someone living a certain amount of time, it then talks about that person doing something, right? Because it'd be weird to talk about, oh, well, you know, Adam was here this long and then he did this. And if it's, I know Adam's a unique case, but just for example, like whenever it does that, the person normally does something afterwards. So I don't think so. I don't think they'd switch up, it would switch up its language like that. That being said, I do tend to think that when it says someone lived this long, that they did live that long, both because I'm a bit more of a literalist with the Bible, but also because it makes sense because you see ages trend down as time goes on, eventually getting to age groups in the modern time. Or I think there's a line where God says he saw it fit that humanity should be 120 years old.
Yeah, it's Genesis 6:4.
They get closer to that. Yes,
6:5,
yeah. They like it's after the flood. I know that. Yeah.
It's actually directly before the flood.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it's God being like, I don't like this anymore. And then he floods the earth. It's the same chapter as the Nephilim.
I know.
So it's
I know.
Yeah, so
right there.
It's like it's literally just God being like, you know, you guys really weren't supposed to breed with humans. Let's hit the reset button. And then also, and you know, my spirit no longer walks with them. Their days shall be 120 years. And then he floods it.
Which is such a heavy thing. Like my spirit no longer walks with them.
What a hefty like sentiment.
Gosh, like that, between that and all the thoughts were evil. Like, man, that's what kills me about Stephen so much. Whenever he's standing there about to be executed, because I'm bringing back Stephen, when he's standing there about to be executed, and he tells them, "You were given the charge of angels, have not followed it." Like, man,
it's a scathing critique.
No wonder they wanted to kill him.
But yeah, it's let me get the
after meeting him.
Yeah, and the Lord said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years." I'm not sure of the Hebrew or the Greek in this case, but I do think the use of the term spirit there is interesting, considering when Christ eventually arrives, we get the Holy Spirit. So God takes basically, you could almost, I'm not, again, this just occurred to me as I was reading it, but like you could almost make the argument that the Holy Spirit was originally there and then God took it away. And then gave it back. But that also, goes to, you know, the idea that the Trinity has always existed, but, you know, that it's no longer, that it coalesces in a more concrete way or later on. From Plaz, we have repeating one from earlier. It is Beyblade canon that Moses used a Beyblade to part the Red Sea. I'm about to look up two words that I never thought I would use in conjunction, which is Beyblade Moses.
Oh, you haven't seen
my
it? You haven't
God.
seen it?
Oh, I'm pulling it up. Hang on. I'm putting it on the screen.
Wait, we can screen share? We've been able to do that this whole time?
Well, yeah. But I mean, I can because of the way I have this set up. There we go.
Right. That's from the show, apparently.
I think you're
From what
getting
I've
ahead of
heard.
yourself.
Yeah, your first plan should be getting by us.
Though you call yourselves bladers, you don't know the real truth about
you
bay
okay?
blading. There is a tremendous power hidden within bays. Since ancient times, the existence of bays can be found in moments throughout history.
The chat's in the middle of the screen right now, but
Power
whatever.
of bay blades have been used to change the course of rivers and oceans.
Aidan's face.
They can't see my
Used
face,
to
but
defeat many armies and create huge
I can't believe
empires.
you've never seen this.
I have absolutely no words.
You're welcome. Oh boy. Where's your god now, Aidan?
I'm struggling. I am having a crisis of faith right now.
Is that the most blasphemous thing you've ever seen?
It's up there. I mean, considering what I talk about for a living, like, I've seen some blasphemous shit, but, like, that's up there.
Someone clip that.
Beyblade Moses?
Beyblade Moses is pretty good.
Does that mean that there's
I love
Beyblade?
that
Does
that's
that imply
part of the
Beyblade
show.
Jesus?
It would have to be. I can't say that. out loud.
There's a Cars Pope, which means there was a Cars Jesus. Like,
Right. How did they crucify him? His little wheels.
maybe they put him up on, like, one of the things they use in auto body shops to lift the
Oh,
chassis.
the lift. They put him on a chest.
And just
chassis lift.
drained his oil. I don't know. A Beyblade killed the dinosaurs too. Oh my god.
Imagine being those show riders. Being like, yeah, I know what we can do. I know what will help boost
This
our ratings.
I will get to the next super chat after this, but this is a good question. I know you've answered this before, but I don't remember. If I want to buy a Bible, which version do I want to buy? Also, why are there so many versions? I will leave the first half of that question up to you, and I think I will answer the second half because it's history related.
So the short version is King James version. It's one I use and the one I always recommend. Primary reason being, every other English translation went through a bunch of road work to get to where it's at. It was translated to this language, to this one, then eventually English. The King James was put together by it was around the same time the printing press was invented, and
King
it
James
was
was 1611.
Yes. They were trying to make a translation and realized there may be some problems with the fact that it went through so many different languages. So they went back to the source and just translated straight to English. So in my opinion, it's the most direct. So
Yeah,
King
the
James.
practice was, for the Catholic Bibles that were getting translated to English, the practice was to, they used the Septuagint, and they translated the Septuagint for the Old Testament into Latin. And then they translated the Latin into Vulgar Latin, which was the kind of like the common form of Latin. Whereas you've got like, think about it the way we speak English. There's proper English, and then there's the way that each dialect works. Vulgar Latin was a dialect. It was used by the common people. It was most prominent in places like Gaul and Britannia and Hispania. So, and the New Testament was Greek to Latin to English. So the KJV was the first English Bible to do what Isaiah just said, which was go directly to the source material. The contention that a lot of people today have with that is that we have discovered new source material. They did not have the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example. So there are certain portions of the KJV that they argue are outdated. The problem with that is that if you compare them to newer translations, they hold up. The hatred for the KJV is actually like stems from Catholic propaganda from the 17th century, and it just somehow made its way all the way into the 21st century. If you're opposed to using the KJV and you want to use a newer translation, you've got a couple of options that went through the same process. The ones that come to mind immediately are the NKJV, which is just the KJV updated for modern English with the inclusion of newer material from like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff that we didn't discover until more recently. And then you could also do the ASV, which is the American Standard Version, which used the same process, or the ESV. The ESV and the ASV were actually the same book. They used the same exact process, but because of some publishing disputes of all things, they were published as two separate editions, I think 20 years apart, maybe 10 years. So that's why. But that leads into what I was going to say about why there are so many translations. That one, it was the same team working on it. It was just they couldn't come to an agreement with the American and the British publishers. So you ended up getting almost the exact same book, except a lot of the English version still has the U's in certain words, like color, that the American version doesn't have because, ironically, the printing press, it was cheaper to print things without the U. Yeah, that's why American English doesn't have U's in anything, by the way, guys. It's the reason American English does not have U in the word color or harbor or other words like that is because it was more expensive to print it with the U's, and Americans, like the beautiful early capitalists they were, said, screw you, I'm just printing the O. We don't need the other one.
That's what this nation was founded on.
Exactly. Taking shortcuts.
Gosh.
Cutting corners.
What they did to it brought the U back.
Exactly.
Not my country.
Yeah. From Cassius Sejuru, we have Wendidad is based and Christ pilled.
Aw, thank you. That's unironically I try to be. Thank you very much.
From Here Come the Pit, thank you probably for answering their question. Thank you. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, Bjornson says also, howdy. My family are pen pals with Scott Stripling, one of the guys that discovered the curse tablet. Anything y'all want me to ask him? Primarily, if he wants to come on the show, he has an open invitation. That would be incredible. I would love to have him on either this or Lore Lodge, either one. That would be phenomenal. But if not that, at the very least, I would love to know what he thinks of the connection to Deuteronomy, where it says that you should put a curse upon Mount Ebal, and if he believes that was a literal translation of like a misunderstanding that like people were cursing the mountain itself, or if they literally meant like go there to place curses.
Go put a curse on it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I would love to know what he thinks of my hypothesis that Exodus occurred around 1200 rather than the previously suggested date of 1500. I would love to know his thoughts on that and if this changes his opinion on the previous stuff. So, I mean, I honestly, I've got a million questions that I would love to ask him. But, those will be my big ones. What about you?
I want to ask him how much of, like, a Chad that guy, or possibly a fool, if he saw a little piece of bronze from ancient history that says, you are cursed by Yahweh, and he's like, oh, do that for later.
It's like some Indiana Jones shit. Like, I'm going to just take this cursed tablet off of this sacred mountain, put it in my pocket, and carry it back to Houston.
It's that meme from Garfield. Like, oh, I wonder who this sign's for. I'm just going to keep that.
Oh.
Man, what a legend. You know if he's dead soon.
Is it like, oh my gosh. Boy. Apparently, Jesus is in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I don't watch anime, so that's why I'm so shocked by all of these Bible cameos in anime shows. But...
And those writers are on something. They're like, oh, make a good historic protagonist?
Jesus Christ! Is it like blasphemy that Jesus is in JoJo? Because like he is not mocked with it. He is a plot element, yes, but they don't bastardize it. I don't know that would be blasphemy necessarily. It might be sketchy.
Not in the traditional word, but I'm going to say it is.
Yeah, I'm going to say if you're a Christian, I would avoid using Jesus as a character in your stories.
As a representative of my church.
Yeah. If you're writing like a time,
I'm going to say no.
If you're writing a time travel story that happens to include going back to first century Judea, and you see Jesus preach, and you use the Bible account of it, that might be okay if you have a character who's like witnessing the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. But I would avoid like fictionalizing Jesus.
Have you seen the? I don't think it's SNL. It's whatever the British equivalent of it is. But they send the Terminator back in time to save Jesus. Okay, so like just
What?
look this up on your own time. It's like a 3-minute skit. It's fantastic.
I'm gonna have to
But
because that's
the
phenomenal.
the Terminator breaks into the upper room like while Jesus is giving it, and immediately shoots Judas. and all the disciples are freaking out, and Jesus stands up and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I am here to protect you." And Jesus goes, "The point is I don't need to be protected." So he goes over and heals Judas. Judas sets up, and the Terminator shoots him again, and that goes on for a while. That's definitely
blasphemy, but it's also pretty funny. Like, I can admit that that's funny. I do think that Christians have had a stick up their ass about comedy for a long time, and it's just made us the butt of more jokes. Like,
correct. Yeah, it's not like the reason I say Joji probably is because I've seen scenes from Joji, and I can't imagine any amount of dignity or respect going into Jesus's portrayal. However, I do think stuff like the Terminator skit, while I wouldn't do it, I don't think is necessarily like devaluing Christianity.
I can laugh at it.
It's just ridiculous. Yeah. It was pretty funny watching Judas get blown up. If anything, it's devaluing Judas, which is half the religion in the first place. So
somebody brought up Family Guy. Family Guy would be considered blasphemy. The episodes involving Jesus. Do I laugh?
Absolutely.
Do I laugh? Absolutely. It's very funny. It's hilarious. It is unironically funny. Is it something that I would do myself? No. But no, I think it's important that we be able to laugh at historical and religious figures. I think if your reaction to somebody making a joke about Jesus is anger, I think that you've missed the point. I don't think that would be Christ-like necessarily. I think that the Christ-like thing to do when you are insulted or mocked is to simply not be bothered by it. Because that's what Christ would have done. He would have been like, believe what you want to believe.
That's what he told Peter when Jesus was being mocked by the Pharisees. Peter was like, "Why don't we kill them?" Because that's how half of Peter's ministry was. And Jesus said, "He who follows me is dead in themselves, and a dead spirit cannot be offended." So.
Yeah, and there's other lines like "Do not cast your pearls before the swine," which a lot of people take that to be insulting, but it's really just like a parable. Like everything Jesus uses to talk to people is like, you
don't give them the time of day.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it means. Turn the other cheek is often misinterpreted because turning the other cheek was an insult to somebody. So it was if somebody slaps you, invite them to do it again. Which I would take that and apply it to comedy. If somebody makes a joke that you find offensive, challenge them to keep going. Like, eventually they're just going to be the asshole.
And I do think the Peter way to do it's the funniest. Like, why can't we kill
why can't
them?
we just execute them?
Why can't we?
See, we tried that.
Blow them up right now.
We tried that for 200 years, and it did not go well for anybody. That would be my argument. We tried the kill them strategy. I don't think anyone would argue that the Crusades were a success.
Dante would.
The first one was fine.
Dante was pretty proud of him.
The first Crusade was great. Like, everybody had a good time. Not the Muslims or the Jews.
I was about to say, what about everyone who wasn't Roman?
But everyone who was a Latin Catholic just had a phenomenal time there.
They were partying. They were throwing down.
Created new kingdoms. Gave them a weird French name.
How many Crusades were there?
That's a good question. When we say the Crusades, we specifically mean the period between 1095 and 1291. 1291 being the fall of Acre, and 1095 being the start of the First Crusade. In that period of time, you could argue there are anywhere from 6 to several dozen Crusades. It depends on how you define crusade, but the ones that really stick out are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. There is a 7th and there is an 8th, but after the 6th one, the church kind of stopped sponsoring them in the Middle East because
Star Wars.
Yeah, it just wasn't going well. It was like, well, part of the problem was that the First Crusade, right? They're very direct. They went through Europe, down into Anatolia, down the coast into Jerusalem. Second Crusade, also pretty direct. but it didn't go well because they got there and then attacked Damascus, which was allied with them. Because the Second Crusade was supposed to be, like, liberating Edessa, I think, if I remember correctly, and they ended up attacking Damascus instead. Third Crusade, just a mess, until Richard the Lionheart got there. Third Crusade is the one with Barbarossa, if I remember correctly. Barbarossa dies drowning in a river because he was swimming because he was hot. The French and the remaining Germans lay siege to Acre, if I remember correctly. And they're laying siege for several months. Nothing's happening. Richard gets there. The people in Acre are aware of who Richard the Lionheart is and the fact that he conquered Sicily in a day, and also the Isle of Cyprus in a day. So they just surrender to Richard immediately.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then another thing that happens in that case is one of the German barons, an Austrian guy, goes in and he hangs his flag. And the rule was whoever hung their flag first in the city got the city. That was the agreement they came to. He goes in and he hangs his flag first, and Richard comes in and cuts it down and hangs his own. Which, to be fair, they weren't going to surrender to the Austrians. They were going to surrender to Richard. Richard also hated England, even though he's known as arguably one of the greatest kings of England. He spent most of his time in Aquitania, and then also a long time in a German prison. But...
Like any good leader.
Yeah. And then the Fourth Crusade is the one everyone knows because it was 1204. They totally screwed up, ended up taking Constantinople and then just stopping there, which destroyed the Byzantine Empire. Not for another 250 years, but it started the inevitable... Like, that was the point of no return. Byzantium was not coming back. Following that, you have the Fifth Crusade, where they were going for Cairo, but the problem was they had to land at Damietta, and then they had to go down through a series of, like, basically canyons, like rocky ravines. The reason that the Crusaders were successful in their earlier battles, in their earlier wars, was mounted knights. There was nothing in the Saracen arsenal that was capable of withstanding a knight in the open field, especially not an entire army of them. Considering the Templars at one point routed a 3,000-man-strong army with 50 men, it gives you an idea of exactly how far advanced European metalworking was compared to Middle Eastern. So the Fifth Crusade, they're going through the ravine, and there's just nothing they can do. They can't use their knights, and the English weren't taking part in very large numbers. It was mainly a French affair at this point, so they didn't have the longbowmen that the English were beginning to use at the time. So you basically had a bunch of men in steel cans riding down a ravine, getting shot with arrows until they died. And then, rather than learning a lesson from that, they tried it again with the Sixth Crusade. And after that, that's when things started to not really happen yet. Okay, from Plaz, for Wendigoon, highly recommend a series called Demon Gate High, a multimedia project that incorporates mythology, folklore, and world religions. Got a big part with the Nephilim as well as Ragnarok. So I don't know if you're into anime. I personally am not.
Ooh, interesting.
But that's definitely a lot of source material. I think that the Norse Ragnarok story, it's kind of told as a prophecy. In reality, it's a cycle. This goes back to a lot of like old European paganism, but everything was cycles. It was things that repeated, that happened over and over again on a large timescale, and also on smaller timescales. There was a belief in reincarnation to a certain extent, but I think that Ragnarok, the story, the cycle, is based off of the same flood from Christianity and Zoroastrianism and Sumerian mythology and Native American mythology. Like, everyone's got a flood. I think the Ragnarok flood is the same flood. And their version of it does involve the world catching on fire, which leads me to believe that we're probably going to find the asteroid that caused Meltwater Pulse 1b somewhere around Norway. I think they should be looking there for that, because that makes the most sense. Because the Nordic version is the only one that involves fire.
And over here, like, why aren't we looking for this rock?
From Here Come the Pit, we have for and Christian Kids. I'm not sure what that's related to.
Here Comes the Pit. Say anything else? He said the thank you. I know that, but
yeah. Let's see. Could I do a video on the battles of Isonzo? I could probably make that happen.
I could work that up.
Yeah. Let's see. Speaking of the Crusades, did y'all see that new article showing how a few pieces of jars found around a few places the Crusades went through suggest they used an early version of grenades, meaning the holy hand grenade is possibly real? Grenades were in use by the Byzantines for a long time. Not exactly the same grenades as today, but they did use a mixture that exploded and caused shrapnel to fly. It was probably not widely used, but it was at the very least like we know it existed. We know they had them. They also had flamethrowers. Again, nobody's really sure the extent to which these were ever used in battle. There's a few depictions, but the Byzantines had some wild technology. If they had had the willpower to actually do anything other than sit around and drink and be rich, they probably could have restored the Roman Empire. They got bored.
That Sigma grind set.
You know. Bjornson for $10. Thank you, Bjornson. Says, "Oh, I forgot. Haven't watched your other episodes yet, but thoughts on the idea of the firmament being a sphere of ice. Dr. Ball, my main tutor, believes this to be the case. How about y'all?" We actually talked about that in, was it the last episode, Genesis?
What was the last episode, yeah?
Yeah, so we talked about that in episode 3, which is on creation. I encourage you to go watch through that one because I think we answered that question pretty firmly. I don't feel that it was ice. Perhaps I'd be willing to accept like constant, like very dense cloud cover, but not ice. Ice doesn't really make sense to me.
Mine was water. Remember?
Yeah, you said water.
That's the idea I postulated. It's like, I mean, frozen water, whatever.
Yeah, your guy says frozen. I say gaseous. Isaiah says liquid.
With our powers combined.
With our powers combined, we are water. We are hydrated is what we are.
There you go.
Let's see. All right. Okay.
There's Fed Aidan again, trying to say it's just clouds.
All right, we'll take one last question.
Just a weather balloon.
Oh, God. We'll take one last question. Isaiah, in the Mr. GG podcast, you mentioned that a lot of people give you slack for your beliefs. Can you give us a silly example?
Yeah, I mentioned on there that, like, Mr. GG asked, like, what's the most thing you get slack from? Like, probably the religious stuff, which is still, like, you gotta understand. I'm not complaining at all. It's, like, a super minimal amount. Like, the other stuff people get on to me for is, like, his voice is annoying, or I don't like his videos, those are normal. Like, other than that, the religion thing's the most common. A lot of the goofier ones are where people will just, like, they'll have heard something about religion, so they'll just, like, apply it to me blanketly. I think we talked in the last episode about how people will be like, you don't even believe in dinosaurs, because someone told them one time that is what Christians believe, that dinosaurs don't exist or whatever.
I don't know why so many people believe that believe that Christians believe dinosaurs don't exist.
Right, yeah. It's like
such a strange. I've never met a Christian who's denied the existence of dinosaurs.
I have not either, but I get that all the time. Like, you think guys, don't listen to him. He's doing research, but he doesn't even think dinosaurs are real. Like, who told you that? A bunch of stuff like that. Sometimes they'll say it. I don't even know, like, where it's coming from. And, like, I have to figure out the hard way. One time, someone was like, haven't you heard the new thing? Jesus wasn't real. He was just a mushroom. I just stared at that, and I was like, what? And then, like, that bothered me. Not that I was having a crisis of faith. I was like, was he having a stroke as he was typing this? So then I hear a show from Joe Rogan, where he goes on, that was like 2 weeks ago, where he's like, so actually, there's this like new report they found where like a dude, just a guy.
This is Joe?
Like, yeah, this is Joe. Like, just some guy from like the 1920s was like, yeah, he was an agnostic and he looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls and he determined that Jesus was actually a name that was a placeholder for like LSD. Like drugs. So,
except it comes
from
Jesus, which comes from Yeshua. Like,
give it a moment. So actually, the entirety of the Bible is just describing drug trips. And I saw that. I was like, that's what the mushroom guy was talking about. That's where he was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
People will do that stuff to me all the time.
I will buy certain things, like I believe that all God's miracles occur through natural processes that he is using. That's my personal opinion.
We've talked about that before, that he uses the physical realm.
So my opinion is that the prophets had higher than usual levels of DMT in their system, which allowed them to communicate with God. So I can see that version of it, but the entirety of Jesus being an LSD trip, like...
You know as well as I do, it's that thing where someone, like, they don't like religion, so they're like, I'm going to put a little spin on it, then I'm going to make a book and get a lot of money, and those are everywhere. Those keep happening.
It's also almost always just grifters. Like...
It's one guy. It is one dude who does it every time. Some of them start their own religions, and they get popular for some reason.
Like the Mormons.
Thank you for saying that. I didn't want to. This guy who was arrested for selling fake treasure maps, I'm going to do what he says. Okay. No offense, but slight offense.
I mean, quite the hustle, honestly. Like,
I mean, it worked for him.
Is it? It's a good scam, because you sell the treasure map, and then, like, if it's not there, you just be like, oh, I guess somebody else found it first. Like...
It is a good scam. It is pretty clever.
Fantastic.
Yeah, like, so people will say something like the mushroom and I have to figure it out. Sometimes I never know. Like, the one that's bothering me right now is there was a comment on the Paradiso video where someone, just like no profile picture loser, was like, this guy's Christian. I bet he thinks dogs are from horses. That's the new one. And what probably happened is some guy who was like, oh, I'm Christian, and also had a mental disorder, but just that wasn't public. And he was like, well, yeah, Noah's Ark, this is my guess. He's like, Noah's Ark had like 4 animals on it, and all animals come from there. So that leads this person to be like, just like Joe Rogan, like, wow, this one person I just found supersedes the entirety of human history. Man, these guys are losers. Finds my YouTube video. You think dogs are from horses? Which gives me a complex, because now I need to know what you just said.
I just... Joe Rogan's a great podcast host, because he'll believe anything you tell him.
Well, that's what makes it interesting. I saw this post that was like, Joe Rogan is the equivalent of, like, a 14th century warrior. Like, stopped fighting and now just has monks come to his, like, hut.
Yeah, I've heard that exact description of him.
Yeah. You tell me of sky, where's star come from?
That said, I love Joe Rogan and I love his podcast. Like, I find the guests incredibly interesting, and he does stand up to them often enough that it's interesting. But I think that there's a few things that I've been like, come on, man.
Yeah, he takes some things as a little too face value.
Another person I love, Tom DeLonge. Blink-182 was one of my all-time favorite bands. He showed Joe a video of like a UFO that was so obviously CGI. Like, it was the most obvious CGI it looked like somebody made it in the 1980s. And even there, like, Joe was definitely skeptical, but he was a little too into it. Like, he believed it a little bit too much, you know? All right, we are now 23 minutes over, so we gotta hop off. But thank you everybody for watching. It has been a pleasure. Isaiah, if you want to, I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but if there's anything you want to plug, I don't know if you have any new stuff coming up.
No, absolutely. Like I said, I've got a Waco video coming up, so thoughts and prayers on that one. To see how that goes. But no, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you again, Aidan, for hosting the show. Thank you everyone for coming to our show. Very cool. But yeah, thank you very much. Had a great time.
All right. See y'all in a month, guys.